Joined.
Trustee Galindo.
Joined.
Rosie Kott.
Joined.
Kristin Kawamoto.
Joined.
Breanne McColman.
Joined. Joined.
Catherine Jepson.
Joined.
Taylor Wright.
Joined.
Alison Mason.
Joined.
Kelly McCrory.
Joined.
Jasmine Gaskin.
Jeff,
Joined.
can you help James, because it just started.
Joined.
Melissa Rizza.
Joined.
Good evening, everyone. I think we just have trustees joining into our public session, and I'm just going to ask people to put themselves on mute as they come in.
Joined.
Okay, we'll just be a minute before we get started.
Maria Felix Miller.
Joined.
Okay, I'm hearing a bit of an echo. If everyone can check that they're on mute, please.
Joined.
Okay, we'll be getting ready to start in just a moment.
John Sheahan.
Joined.
Jennifer Robertson-Heath.
Joined.
Trustee Bingham.
Joined.
Mackenzie.
Joined.
Tracy McKillop.
Joined. Joined. Joined.
Okay, welcome everyone and good evening. I'm just going to confirm that the live stream is started.
Through the chair, yes, the live stream has started.
Thank you. So I would like to call this meeting to order and start with our land acknowledgement.
Joined.
I'll note that I do live up by the actual education center in the Hamilton-Wentworth District Board. Acknowledges our presence on ancestral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee Confederacy land as determined by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. The intent of this agreement is for all nations sharing this territory to do so responsibly, respectfully, and sustainably in perpetuity. We respect the long-standing relationships with the local Indigenous communities, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Six Nations of the Grand River. At this time, we will play O Canada.
Honeybee. Joined. Joined.
Danny Fede.
Joined.
Okay, I know we can't hear O Canada well on the line, if at all, so it is completed. So for our meeting for Monday, February 22nd, 2021, I am Dawn Danko and chairing the meeting. I'm going to start with a roll call for trustees, noting that I've received regrets from Trustee Archer and Trustee Pakin-Miller. Trustee Bingham, are you with us on the line?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Bach?
I'm here.
Thank you. Trustee Dees?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Galindo?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Johnstone?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Miller?
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Mulholland? Trustee Mulholland? Trustee Tutt?
Present.
Thank you. Student Trustee Hessler?
Present.
Thank you. Student Trustee Zakar?
Present.
Thank you. And Sagawana Galverdat Segi? Sagawana Galverdat Segi? Okay, thank you. And just as we get started, I'll just remind trustees and student trustees of our remote meeting norms, noting that we have some guests on our line tonight. Please ensure that you're on mute unless you're called upon to speak to help with our audio quality. Please direct all comments or questions through the chair so that I can direct them to the appropriate person. Reports from trustee committees will go through roll call to see if there are any questions. If there's a monitoring report, I can open the floor to questions and ask you to unmute yourself and signal you would like to speak so that I can create a speakers list. To move an item, I will select a mover and a seconder as needed. If you are not okay with moving or seconding an item, please unmute yourself and state this. For voting, I will go to a negative vote and only ask who is opposed. If you are opposed to a motion, please ensure that you unmute yourself and state this. And as we engage in respectful dialogue and debate, I acknowledge that we all have different perspectives and experiences, along with the additional challenge when we cannot see each other in person. I would like to remind everyone that all trustees and student trustees have the right and responsibility to participate in an open and respectful debate of issues. Please note, in addition to the chair, each trustee has the opportunity and responsibility to raise a point of order in response to any statement or action that they perceive to be inappropriate as per our Code of Conduct and Equity Policy. At this time, I would like to go to item 5. We've received a written delegation from Beatrice Ekoko and community members regarding traffic calming and pedestrian safety on Wilson Street at the Dr. J.E. Davey Elementary School. And trustees will note there is a written delegation package as well as a number of videos that were sent through the trustee officer. And I'm just noting I did receive regrets from Segawanagal Radat Segi for tonight. I didn't have a note of that. I apologize. With regards to the written delegation, I will open the floor up. We obviously don't have our delegator here with us in person, but are there any questions for clarification that we need to send to the delegator to get clarification for trustees? I'll just open the floor. You can let me know if you'd like to speak.
Chair Ding.
Yep, Chair Danko, Trustee Bingham, but I will go after. I believe that's Trustee Miller who's speaking.
Okay, so Trustee Bingham, we'll start. Trustee Miller, you had a question?
Hi, thank you through the chair. I didn't have any questions at the moment, but I did want to take a moment to publicly thank this incredible delegation. Friendly Streets has been working on this issue for at least a couple of years. It's been an issue that they have mobilized many community groups in the Bisley neighborhood, but also beyond that. I know also Barton Street BIA, Environment Hamilton, Cycle Hamilton, and this package is just incredibly fulsome, incredibly detailed. I appreciate so much the amount of information and the variety of issues that they've considered here. It's very concerning, the safety issues around Dr. Davies School, both for Ward 3 and Ward 2 residents. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and thank everybody for their work on this, but also highlight that industrial traffic through and around our schools is a very serious and important issue. Air pollution, safety, our children and their families have the right to go to and from school in a way that is safe and active and that promotes a healthy lifestyle. So I'm very, very happy to see this in front of us tonight, and I hope that we as a board can encourage this conversation at the city level, but also here at this table. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll just go to Trustee Bingham. I did accidentally just look to the color on my screen and skip past the profiling excellence, which I know we are all here and excited to do. So I'll just wrap this item up and we'll just jump back to profiling excellence. My apologies. Trustee Bingham?
Okay, yes, that sounds good. So, yes, with the... and again, I echo what Trustee Miller is saying. Thank you to everyone who has pulled this together, because the videos that they actually sent, one of them was Wilson Street, directly beside this Dr. Davies School, but the other one was Hess Street School on York Boulevard. And something to note between the two of them for those trustees who do not know, Cannon Street, which runs on the opposite side of, parallel to Wilson, the school would be in between the two of them. And Cannon Street actually runs right straight through to York Boulevard, which means that all the trucks that go by for the children walking on Cannon Street to Dr. Davy are also the same, or most of them same trucks that do go by the Hess Street School as well. And Wilson Street, yes, it's extremely dangerous with the amount of trucks that are going past there, and that also is York Boulevard going past Hess Street in the other direction. So they really do connect with all of that traffic together. I'd like to put motion forward so that we would be able to, one, hopefully get it on the agenda for the city board liaison committee for very near future, if we can, but also a letter to the city outlining the dangers of the students walking to and from school, from both of the schools, as well as the impact of the noise and the fumes on a daily basis for our students, both in the schools and on the grounds, or even walking to and from the schools themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Bingham. I'm wondering if we could just table the motion so that we can go back to profiling excellence, recognizing we have some guests on the line with us, and then come right back to that. Is anyone opposed to doing that?
Through the chair, I'm not opposed, but I would like to second that motion. It's Trustee Miller, but happy to talk about it when it's appropriate.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's just put a pause there. We'll table that motion and come right back to it, and we'll go to where we should be, which is item 4, profiling excellence. My apologies to staff and to our guests that are with us tonight virtually. This is the challenge when you can't see people and you're just looking at something on the screen. So can I turn that over through the director to Superintendent Safanian?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it is my pleasure this evening to be introducing trustees to a group of staff under Profiling Excellence. As our trustees are aware, each month we take the opportunity to pause and to reflect on the accomplishments of both our students and our staff, not only within the walls and the classrooms of our schools, but also in the broader community. And this evening we have a significant number of staff who are with us, and we are recognizing them this evening for all of their hard work and dedication to creating healthy spaces and healthy schools within Hwdsb. The staff members who we are about to congratulate and present with Profiling Excellence Awards have led work within each of their individual schools, which has resulted in the school receiving from OPHEA the Gold Healthy Schools certification. Huge accomplishment. So thank you to all of them. So for those who may not be familiar with OPHEA's Healthy Schools certification program, there are 3 levels that a school may receive in addition to a school that receives recognition for being certified as a healthy school, but having not yet earned enough points to be awarded the status of a gold school, which, as I mentioned, are the schools that we have with us this evening. The leadership of the staff, who you are about to meet, has been instrumental in focusing on a healthy school, whole school approach within their individual schools. The Healthy Schools certification engages the whole school community in a focus around the health and well-being of the children and the youth in the school, in addition to the school staff and the broader community. So there really is a very wide-reaching impact of the work. The certification itself is based on a 6-step process that these staff have led their in-school and local school community through that has resulted in earning the gold certification status. We know when we think about our priorities within the board, the importance of positive culture and well-being, and certainly this particular work highlights the importance of well-being as a goal for what happens within our schools. The schools who participate in the certification can choose to focus on one of 6 health topics. It could be mental health, physical activity, healthy eating, personal safety and injury prevention, growth and development, or substance use, addictions, and related behaviors. The schools are asked to focus only on one area. Certainly there are connections between all of the areas, but again, it really provides for that targeted approach in schools. So we are tonight very appreciative of all of the leadership and the commitment to the staff who I am about to introduce for their work in supporting students and supporting the broader community in earning the gold certification. We know that it is about more than the certification, though. It is about staying healthy and being healthy, and that impacts lives forever. And the staff who I'm about to introduce you to are individuals who have impacted the lives of their school community immeasurably. So it's a bit challenging in a virtual arena because at this point we would ask people to stand so that we could applaud them, but I am still going to ask trustees if they're able to come off mute for applause as I introduce the staff. That would be appreciated. So congratulating Kim Mackenzie from Cootes Paradise. From Queen Mary this evening, we have Taylor Wright, Melissa Rizza, and Kathy Jepson. From Millgrove, we have Alison Mason. From Glen Echo, we have Jasmine Gaskin. From W.H. Ballard, we have John Sheahan and Rachel Roper. From Sir William Osler, Rosie Kott. From Earl Kitchener, Breanne McColman. And from Sir Wilfrid Laurier, Kristin Kawamoto. And while we're not together in a face-to-face environment, please know that we truly appreciate and value all that you do and all that you give to the students within your school each and every day. And thank you for supporting the importance of their health and well-being. And Madam Chair, that concludes Profiling Excellence this evening.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Stefanian. If people can do a last round of applause for everyone, if they're ready. Ready, set. I know this isn't how we like to celebrate. We're so grateful that if you're able to join us on the line, and so grateful for your dedication and the support that you provided at your schools that will have lasting impacts on our students and on our communities. So thank you so much for your work. Usually we would take a photo of a group after something like this. So if you're able to send in maybe a selfie, you can send that through Sharon or to Sean McKillop. Maybe we can put together a little collage so that we can see your faces as well. So thank you, everyone. I'll give our recipients of the Profiling Excellence Award a minute to leave the call. You certainly don't have to stick around for the whole evening.
Ellie McCrory.
Left.
Danny Fede.
Left.
Mackenzie.
Left.
John Sheahan.
Left.
Kristin Kawamoto.
Left.
Alison Mason.
Left.
Jennifer Robertson Heath.
Left.
Rosie Kott.
Left.
Taylor Wright.
Left. Left.
Catherine Jepson.
Left.
Mark Tattison.
Left.
Breanne McColman.
Left.
Jasmine Gaskin.
Left.
Melissa Rizza.
Left.
Okay, I think we can go back then to our tabled motion, which was moved by Trustee Bingham, seconded by Trustee Miller, and that was a motion to refer the issue of, traffic calming and pedestrian safety on Wilson Street and for Dr. Davey Elementary as well as House Street Elementary to the City School Board Liaison Committee, recognizing we don't have a date scheduled, to also write a letter to the city regarding, and I'm going to put words potentially in your mouth, Trustee Bingham, so please correct me if this doesn't summarize it well, but to write a letter to the city regarding the impacts of the truck route on active, safe, and sustainable school transportation. Is that okay, Trustee Bingham?
Yes, that is perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So we do have a motion moved and seconded. I'll just go to the mover and seconder first and then see if there are any other questions or comments. Trustee Bingham, anything further to add?
No, just that if for those who were able to watch the videos, the whole impact is that it goes straight through our downtown core, yes. But it's directly beside the two schools. It directly affects both those schools, the same traffic, the same truck traffic. It's extremely dangerous for the walking, for crossing the street, but it's also the noise factor as well as the fumes and whatnot on the students who are outside playing in the playground or walking around. It is very dangerous all around. So my hope is that we can actually really help move the agenda along for possibly rerouting the trucks so that they are not going directly beside our schools and endangering our students and our staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Bingham. Trustee Miller?
Thank you. And to the Chair, I'm very happy to second this motion this evening. as was highlighted in the package before trustees tonight, it's not only an issue of industrial trucks, and the package actually did clarify as well that it's specifically industrial truck traffic, so not trucks that are doing local deliveries. There is a increased risk of, some very severe, very serious safety concerns around vehicular accidents, as well as increased air pollution. There is also actually, in particular to the area surrounding Dr. Davy, an issue around narrow and uneven sidewalks, which is also highlighted. So I do feel that should probably also be captured in the letter. And also captured in tonight's delegation is that this area, particularly the Beasley neighborhood in our lower city, Hamilton, has a higher rate of single-parent families, families who live in apartments, higher levels of families who identify as immigrants, and overall actually a lesser access to vehicles. The people who do live in this area actually do tend to walk and bike to work and school more often than the rest of Hamilton. So I think that's really important. That not only is it a concern overall for safety, but we really do have to recognize that Dr. Davy, as well as Trustee Bingham has pointed out, as well as Hess Street School, do really need and would benefit from a very specifically localized safety and traffic calming plan at the city level. And I hope that trustees would be willing to support the letter writing and the continuation of this discussion at our city board liaison committee, because it's pretty clear to me that these are some very real concerns brought forward by an immense amount of community leadership and organization, and I think we should both listen to what is in the delegation tonight, but amplify that and support and promote the work where we can as a Board of Trustees. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just run through the roll call for other trustees to see if you have any questions or comments to the motion. Trustee Buck?
Just one comment. I'm in full support. If someone else hadn't suggested it, I would have put this forward myself. Just wonderful delegation work, really just so important. That's it for me.
Thank you. Trustee Deese?
Thank you, and no comments, just echoing what the other trustees have said.
Thank you. Trustee Galindo?
Just wanting to clarify the motion on the floor. Is it to add this to the agenda at a future City Liaison Committee meeting and to write a letter of support, or just to make it the agenda item?
It is both.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. No, I'm in full support of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Johnstone?
No comments. I am in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Tutt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of comments. First off, I think Trustee Maria Felix Miller captured the comments quite well with respect to the work that the community has done and how fulsome the material was. Also thank the community for bringing these concerns forward. I think it was revealing. I also think that I want to thank Trustee Bingham for bringing the motion forward. It's absolutely critical when we're trying to deal with traffic and road safety in our school communities. I would, given the concerns and looking at the material, I wonder if my fellow trustees would support a friendly amendment if we're looking at sending correspondence or having a letter written to our colleagues at the city. I wonder if it also makes sense to send a letter to our partners at Hamilton Police Services, given the safety concerns around the traffic, which is quite revealing. So I put that on the floor to you, Madam Chair, so the trustees will consider that SME amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Tutt. Just to clarify, are you recommending that the letter we send to the city is copied to Hamilton Police Services?
Yes, that's what I'm proposing.
Thank you. To the mover, is that an acceptable amendment, or do we want to go through debating an amendment? To Trustee Bingham?
Sorry, yes. No, that's fine. I'm happy with that amendment.
Okay, and so to the motion, I'll go to Student Trustee Hessler. Any comments or questions?
Thank you. No questions, but I am in full support of the motion.
Thank you. Student Trustee Zakar?
No questions.
Thank you. And as someone who is part of, I got to sign the papers that we committed to active and sustainable school transportation, along with the city as one of our partners a number of years ago in our past board. I think that, in light of what the delegators have provided to us and what's been said already, this is an important step that we need to take to advocate on behalf of the communities in this area. So I appreciate the motion, and I'm in full support. Back to Trustee Bingham for any closing remarks.
No, I do want to thank the trustees for really supporting something that is so critically important to our students and our staff, but our families, our neighborhoods. So this has been something that has been talked about many times before, but this is the first time we've really taken a definite first forward response if this goes through tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. So to the motion to refer this to the City School Board Liaison Committee and to write a letter to the city and include Hamilton Police Services. Is anyone opposed? Hearing none. Thank you, trustees and student trustees. Moving to item 6, approval of the agenda. I'll just select Trustee Buck to move the agenda, seconded by Trustee Deese, if that's okay. Are there any amendments or questions? And is anyone opposed to approving the agenda? Hearing none, I'll move to item number 7, declarations of conflict of interest. I'll note that I have received a written declaration from Trustee Buck for item 14. Trustee Buck, can you just state the reason for your conflict of interest?
Yes, Madam Chair. I am named in the communication in Appendix A, and I just, out of an abundance of caution, just wanted to submit that.
Joined.
Thank you, Trustee Buck. Are there any other declarations of conflict of interest? Okay, hearing none, moving to item 8, which is confirmation of the minutes from February 2nd and February 8th, 2021. Are there any corrections? I'll give Trustee just a moment to scroll to that page. Are there any items that need to be corrected in the minutes? Hearing none, I'll move along to item 9. We have correspondence regarding the external investigative report from 2 different groups, the Hamilton-Wentworth Principals Council and the Hwdsb Managers Leadership Group. And so for correspondence, we typically look for a motion to receive and file. Given the topic of the correspondence, I think it's important to highlight the importance of the issues of systemic racism and oppression that are highlighted, as well as the need for accountability. So I would be looking for a motion to receive and file, and for the chair to provide a written acknowledgement to the groups that send in the correspondence.
I'll motion that. It's Trustee Miller.
Trustee Miller, and can I make that seconded by Trustee Johnstone?
Yes.
Any questions?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Trustee Glenda, go ahead.
Yeah, just building on what you just said, Madam Chair, these letters represent elementary and secondary principals and vice principals and our board, and of course the voices of our system leaders and managers. And I just want to be mindful, as you mentioned, that the worst thing that we can do is essentially file these letters and then shelve them. But there are a few things that stood out to me from the letters, and I have a question for staff after I just highlight the things that stood out to me. Daily, members of our local Principals Council hold high professional expectations for themselves to conduct their affairs with honesty, integrity, and fairness, and they ask that they be supported in their roles by holding everyone to the same standard that they hold themselves, and that the steps forward must be brave and purposeful so that real healing can happen. And likewise, with the manager's leadership cabinet, they recognize that it can be very challenging to break from the usual process when we know that those practices can cause harm to others, and we know that the courage to act in a manner that demonstrates transparency, humility, and accountability is very important. And ultimately, they say that they cannot ask our students and staff to act in a manner that we as leaders do not abide by. So as they reflect on practices and policies that create inequality and cause harm, they appreciate that this requires them to disrupt their usual practices, open themselves to hearing different voices and to challenge the status quo, and they are hopeful that we as trustees will embrace that same commitment that they've made to staff and students to create equitable and safe environments for everyone. So it's clear to me that system leaders have wholeheartedly embraced the board's commitment to learning, equity, engagement, and innovation. And as I reflect on the content of these letters and the challenges that these groups have put forward before the board, could I get clarification from staff on perhaps any context that may be missing, or how these letters came about and how the director received these letters?
Certainly I can turn to the director to clarify how this correspondence would have come to trustees, but noting that any group can send correspondence to trustees through our normal practices. Mr. Director?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. I guess the question was around context and how I received them. On a monthly basis, I meet, and the two associate directors, we meet with our principal executive. We call it a shared leadership meeting where we discuss our strategic direction priorities, our board annual plan implementation, and some systemic operational challenges and solutions. At this meeting, they indicated that they had a letter that they wanted to send and to send to the Board of Trustees, and that they were going to send it to me. So as the Secretary of the Board, I explained to them that there was a vehicle around correspondence that they sent it to me, and I would make sure it got sent to the Chair and the Board of Trustees. And the following day, I had my monthly meeting with managers leadership. We have an agenda, and at the end, this was raised as well. They asked the same questions. So it came out of the context of our monthly meetings where we discuss our strategic directions, our annual plan, and as trustees know, we launched our annual plan this year, and we were reviewing our key commitments, especially around equity, Indigenous education, our Safe Schools Action Plan, and ableism with our Spec Ed vision. And I reassured them that this is our ongoing commitment, and we are committed to moving forward collectively. So through the chair, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Trustee Glendo?
It certainly does. Thank you. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments?
I have a question, Madam Chair. It's Trustee Tutt.
Go ahead, Trustee Tutt. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah. My question through you, Madam Chair, to the Director is, with regards to this letter, I wonder, is this isn't a common letter that's typically sent. So I wonder, is this, in the Director's opinion, an extraordinary type of circumstance? Is this type of letter that would be written, and it's not something in common practice or business?
To the Director?
So through the chair, I will say that in my 5.5 years as director at these monthly shared leadership meetings with both associate directors or managers cabinet, it is the first time I've received a letter of correspondence or something in writing to me from both of the management groups. Through the chair.
Thank you. Mr. Director, I'm just noting some people are having a little bit of trouble hearing you. If you can speak closer to the microphone the next time. Trustee Tat?
Thank you. Those are my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further?
I have a question, if I may. It's Trustee Miller.
Go ahead, Trustee Miller.
Thank you to the Director for his work on ensuring that all of the groups that we work with have an appropriate way to correspond with us and to share their concerns with us. I also believe that we've received letters on the same issue from both our elementary teachers union, our secondary teachers union, and I can't remember if it was our DECEs or EAs. Could someone clarify where those letters are and if we will be receiving them in this same official capacity?
Thank you. I know that all trustees did receive those letters as they were emailed to them, to the Director on process if those groups had submitted them as correspondence.
Thank you, through the chair. For our unionized groups, they made them public and then sent them to us at the same time. So they had already been public and trustees received them. Our management groups asked if they could be sent to me and then made public through our board correspondence and public package that we do every month. So that's the route they chose. But if the trustees do not have the letters from the union, through the chair, I believe we can distribute to the collective group. But it was not requested of me to share it as correspondence on public agendas. It was requested from the two management groups, through the chair.
Thank you. Trustee Miller?
Thank you so much. I appreciate the clarification on the different practices. I will just share some final comments. I want to echo just what Trustee Galindo has stated, that these two letters are very serious. They are a very serious request for accountability and leadership from us as a board of trustees. And further, in my short time as a first-term trustee, I don't think I've ever seen this many groups unified, or rather, let me rephrase that, compelled to communicate on an issue so seriously and so urgently. So I'm hopeful that the work here can continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Miller, anything further?
No, those are my comments for this evening. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, meant to open to the table. Thank you. I was going to make a statement for my chair's report, but I think it actually is quite appropriate in relating to our correspondence that we've received. I think nobody would say that what we are working through right now as a board of trustees is not serious, and I don't think that that's been suggested. I think I'm just highlighting that it is absolutely serious, and the importance of working through a process that is fair, that is using integrity, honesty, and that is breaking from our usual process, as highlighted in these letters, is critical, and that is what trustees have been doing and are committed to continuing to do. I want to just acknowledge that we know that we received our Code of Conduct investigative report from our external investigator this month, and we voted to adopt all 12 recommendations for our board. And I want to highlight that we will be moving forward and working on these recommendations as soon as this coming Thursday when we have a special governance meeting. But I also want to acknowledge process. So with respect to the process, we have heard from our members of our community, and we're hearing from different stakeholder groups that there's frustration with the process, and there's seeking to see that trustees are holding ourselves to the highest account and that we are doing things in a transparent way. We are holding ourselves accountable. And we want to acknowledge while the investigator examined allegations and provided detailed recommendations for our board, it did not, the investigator did not comment on potential code of conduct violations, which is something that the board has agreed needs to be addressed. And that is why, as a board, we have commenced an expedited process to investigate and review potential breaches of the code of conduct and explore sanctions. And this aligns with the steps in our code of conduct, procedural fairness, all of the things that have not happened through the initial investigation. So that process I want to highlight is not our normal practice. It is disrupting what we normally do, but it's very important. It is currently underway, and we will report back to the public as soon as possible. So I do want to just acknowledge that this is highly important, and trustees are committed to doing this important work. So with that, I hadn't heard any other further comments, so I will move this along. I was looking for a motion to receive and file, but also to send a written acknowledgement. Would someone like to make that motion?
Madam Chair, I think it's is it already on the floor? Yes. Trustee Johnstone seconded it.
Oh, thank you. So that was moved by Trustee Miller, seconded by Trustee Johnstone. Thank you. Is anyone opposed? Hearing none, I will follow up with that correspondence. Our next item is a report from Trustee Special Committee or Program Committee, item 10, and I will turn it over to Trustee Buck to bring forward the report.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Let me look at the date. So February 1st, the Program Committee met. We had an action item on the floor regarding our SHSM programs. Staff provided an overview of SHSM, our specialist high skills majors, its recommended action, and supporting rationale and background. Staff highlighted key data, completed rates, the year in review, and the new 3-year plan with identifying next steps. Highlights of the presentation included that we have 54 SHSM programs in 14 sectors in the 2020-21 academic year. This is an increase of 29 programs over the past 3 years, which I would consider a huge win. Double the number of students involved from 2016-17 to the present, with a current participation rate of 21%. Completion rate of 78% across all programs in 2019-2020, consistently above provincial rates. Information regarding SHSM was shared through the following. Our Hwdsb SHSM student enrollment and footprint, identifying SHSM participant percentages from 2016-17 to the 2020-21. I guess that would be a typo. My apologies. Completion rates, SHSM students graduating with a SHSM Red Seal, providing a comparison of Hwdsb rates to provincial numbers from 2016-17 to 2019-20. The Ministry of Education's criteria through Appendix A, scoring rubric. The full listing of Hwdsb SHSM programs and locations through Appendix B, SHSM programs available starting September 2020. On the motion of Trustee Deeth related to the secondary program strategy, the Program Committee recommends for approval that we continue to offer, advertise, and support the specialist high school major programs listed in the secondary program strategy. That we continue to consider all SHSM Tier 3 programs with specific boundaries based on program locations and school catchment areas. That we continue the SHSM development process and open new SHSM programs when there is an when there is student interest and engagement in the key subject area, internal school capacity, so when we have staff champions, adequate facilities, and course offerings for all pathways, when labor market evidence or labor market data that indicates an employment need in the sector, no foreseeable impact on programs within the school or SHISM programs offered in other schools, and existing partnerships for cooperative education placements, training, and certification programs. That was passed unanimously, so I just draw trustees' attention to this is an action item for us tonight. We then had our 21st Century Learning Report. Staff presented the 21st Century Learning Report as a follow-up to the June 1st, 2020 report. An update was provided regarding the strategy implementation, indicating that the formal launch did not occur because of COVID. However, responding to the pandemic required staff to accelerate other aspects of implementation by integrating the 21st Century Learning Strategy into the reopening in September 2020 in the following areas: e-learning, elementary remote school, secondary rotational model, remote readiness, and specialized services support. Staff provided an update regarding vision and goals of the learning strategy with a focus on preparing graduates with digital skills and 21st century competencies, and the goal of providing guidance the organization on the development of modern learning environments. 6 key components to the modern learning environment: blended, modern, experimental, personalized, success-oriented, intentional. 21st century learning competencies, identifying learning to learn as having become a theme during HWDSB's pivot to remote learning. How digital skills are valued both locally and globally by employers and post-secondary institutions. Next steps in strategy implementation involving consideration for the development of recommendations regarding remote learning for the April 2020 Program Committee meeting. Commencement of a learning resources review. Development of measurements of strategy implementation. Continuing to align with other HWDSB initiatives, including our Equity Action Plan, Specialized Services, and Facilities Master Plans. The formal launch in fall of 2021 with an anticipated enhanced strategy resulting from our experiences in the current school year. Item C was our Positive Culture and Wellbeing Report. It was a very full evening, folks. Staff introduced the members of their team and emphasized the important shift in the goal from 2019-20 to 2021-22, discussing targets and strategies with a focus on closing the gap for those who have been historically underserved, and presented the report, which included a review of the 2019-20 implementation of the HWDSB Annual Plan, Positive Culture and Wellbeing, and the planned implementation of the 2021-22 HWDSB Annual Plan. Positive Culture and Wellbeing COVID-related updates were also mentioned, including attendance, social work referrals, and consultations, as well as case information. We also discussed suspension and expulsion data, and Safe Schools incident reporting form data. Staff shared the following highlights: a celebration of 2019-20 annual plan that included professional learning on emotion coaching, a pilot for nurturing safer schools, launch of the Learning Nest program at Nora Francis Henderson, welcoming, and I'm so sorry I can't pronounce it yet, Segawana Karatat, so that would be our Indigenous student trustee to the board, providing curriculum in response to 2 pandemics, COVID-19 and anti-Black racism, introduction of Learn, Disrupt, Rebuild at HWDSB, building a community of care. We also discussed the addition of Graduation Coach for Black Students program at 2 secondary schools, the development of Human Rights Leadership Series, the completion of our Employment Equity Audit, and the development of Employment Equity Action Plan. It was noted that the provincial job sanctions and the COVID-19 pandemic impacted progress in 2019-20 and resulted in staff being unable to conduct the necessary surveys to collect the key data required to measure progress. As such, staff was unable to measure the targets and to have an increase by June 2020 in students and staff feeling safe, supported, and accepted. Staff are reviewing data gathered through the Safe Schools Survey, implemented as part of the Bullying Prevention and Intervention Review Panel for related measures, and will provide the program committee with a monitoring report in May. Opportunities in 2021-22 include supporting the mental health strategy through the application of emotion coaching and the pilot for nurturing safer schools, completing the student census in support of the Equity Action Plan, developing and commencing implementation of a Safe Schools Action Plan based on Safe Schools Bullying Prevention and Intervention Review Panel report in support of Safe Schools Action Plan, as well as the implementation of our Employment Equity Action Plan. And with that, I would put the report on the table.
Okay, so that would be a motion to approve the report?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll look to Trustee Miller to second that as one of the committee members and open that up to questions for trustees. So I'll just go through roll call to see if there are questions. I'll go in reverse order, and for student trustees, I'll come to you at the end just so you've got time to consider. Trustee Tutt, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Miller?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Johnstone?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Galindo?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
To the action item in the report under, I'm wondering what we mean by, so under continue the SHSM development process and open new programs where there is, and then it lays out a set of criteria. I'm wondering what the second last criteria means, if I could get clarification on that, where it says no foreseeable impact on programs within the school or SHSM programs offered in other schools. I had a hard time understanding what that meant.
Thank you. I'll just go to the director to start and possibly to Superintendent Torrens. Director?
Yep, I will pass to Superintendent Bill Torrens to explain that criteria.
Thank you. And through the chair, that criteria is really about ensuring that when we're considering new programs, that they do not compete with other programs within the school. So a similar program that would absolutely compete with students and therefore student enrollment. And by making two programs, we're actually weakening two weaker programs rather than one strong program. Certainly, we do look at trying to have as many programs in each school, but there may be some cases where we find that opening a program at a neighboring school could actually hurt programming at that school. Again, it's a rare case, but we do take it into consideration.
Thank you. Trustee Galindo?
No, that answers all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Deese?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Bingham?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Student Trustee Zakar?
No questions.
Thank you. And Student Trustee Hessler, I noted you were at our meeting for a program, but do you have any questions?
Yes, I actually do have one question. So thank you, and through the chair. My question is specific to the Learn, Destruct, Rebuild process. So personally, I think it's an amazing idea, and it's really well implemented. Just at my school and speaking to my experience with it, my teacher has executed it brilliantly. But is there any kind of training for staff? Just because I know my teacher does an extremely good job at it, but I don't know if that kind of experience is the same for all students that kind of go through the Learn, Destruct, Rebuild process. So is there any kind of standard training for all the teachers for that?
Thank you, Student Trustee Hessler, for the question. I'll start with the Director, and just noting Trustee Tutt did have to leave the meeting at this point. Mr. Director?
Thank you, through the Chair. Before I go to Superintendent Stefanian, I thank Student Trustee for raising this, and I want to acknowledge that this has been created by our Equity and Wellbeing Division, also by educators in schools over the summer. So it's been really a grassroots effort to bring this innovative and incredible work forward. But I'll pass over to Superintendent Stefanian to answer your question specifically about the professional learning and training around this, because we do know that it is critical work and it is part of our board annual plan expectations. Superintendent Stefanian?
And just before we go there, just going to remind people to check that you're on mute because it sometimes interferes with the audio. Sorry, go ahead, Superintendent.
Thank you to the student trustee for the question. And yes, we recognize the importance of supporting the training and the learning of staff as we're implementing Learn, Disrupt, Rebuild. So what our training has looked like is we have opportunities to meet with our school administrators as part of their learning structure, and they engage in formal learning approximately once a month for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. We then supplement those formal learning sessions with informal learning sessions that we call drop-ins, where there's an opportunity for principals to come in to virtually come in and to meet with members of the equity team to talk about implementation at the school level and the work that they're going to do at their staff meeting. The staff meeting and PD days are time in which school staff together will engage in learning around the Learn, Disrupt, Rebuild, or sometimes the learning that they engage in is foundational learning to teaching the lessons. So, for example, recently, during our staff meetings, we asked administrators to lead learning with their staff around identity, unpacking their own identity, their own positionality, and then thinking about centering students in the work. So, again, foundational for some of the teaching within Module 2. We also have introduced after-school learning sessions by division. So, again, an opportunity for educators who would like to meet with the equity team to dig a little bit deeper into the modules, to ask questions about implementation, clarification. Those learning sessions have been provided for staff as well. And the team continues to look at other ways to be responsive, looking for feedback from classroom educators as we work through the modules so that we can adjust and introduce new options for learning as we go forward.
Thank you. Student Trustee Hessler?
Thank you. That answered my question perfectly. No further comments.
Thank you. And I did just have one question. I was able to attend part of the meeting as well. Just on the item B for 21st century learning, there was a note that we will be considering, considering development of recommendations regarding remote learning that will come to the next program committee meeting. And just through the director, will we have an opportunity at this time or at a later time to consult with our communities and other stakeholders, such as our union partners, on that?
So, through the chair, I'll pass over to Superintendent Bill Torrance if he has anything further to add after I made my comment. So this is a topic that is being discussed provincially with Code and with the Minister around expectations for September across the province, around remote learning or remote school, and whether that direction is going to be given to us, to school boards, or whether boards will have the option to make a decision because of parent choice. We know it's not a choice for all students, so we have had consultations with our union partners. Their position is a little different than what we are bringing forward. They're concerned about it, and they're public about that. I won't speak on their behalf, but that's been their position. So I'll ask if Superintendent Bill Torrance has anything further to add in terms of what's coming in April, but we know it's a critical time because of our budget process, and at this time the ministry has been asked every week around whether they will be making a decision or whether local boards will have that power to do so around a program of choice for parents. At this point, the ministry hasn't provided any clarification, partially because they don't know in September whether where we'll be with the pandemic and whether that will still need to be an option boards plan for. But if it's not an option boards plan for, boards are exploring whether that's an option based on some parent and student choices we're hearing that they might want to continue in this mode of learning. I'll ask if Superintendent Bill Torrance has anything further to add.
Thank you. And through the chair, all I would add is that as we prepare for the recommendation in April, we have not planned for an extensive consultation. However, we are receiving staff, student, and parent voice through a variety of different channels. However, staff will take that away and consider if we want to heighten the nature of our consultation prior to the April program meeting.
Thank you. Okay, and so to the motion to approve the program committee report, moved by Trustee Buck, seconded by Trustee Miller. Is anyone opposed? Hearing none, we'll move along to item number 11, our Parent Involvement Committee report from February the 9th, 2021. Trustee Deeth, would you be able to bring forward the report?
I will. Thank you, and through the chair. So there was just 4 information items. The first one was a budget update by Denise Dawson, and she highlighted the online public consultation is open for input until February 25th. The second was a COVID communications update by our Manager of Communications and Community Engagement, Sean McKillop. And he just talked about, gave an overview of the communication protocol since students return to in-person learning, talking about conversation around what's too much communication, what's not enough. Item 3 is in regards to the school year calendar. So our new superintendent at PIC, Stella Jones, updated the committee on the calendar, and that public consultation is available online until February 25th, and then submitted to the ministry on May 1st for approval. Item D is the standing items from the various groups, and with that, I'll move the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Deeth. So moving to receive the report, I'll do that seconded by Trustee Buck as the other member present. I'll just open the floor then if anyone has any questions, if you can signal that you'd like to speak, and I can create a speakers list. Are there any questions or comments to the report? Hearing none, is anyone opposed to receiving the report? Okay, thank you, trustees and student trustees. Moving to item 12, our Special Education Advisory Committee from January 27th, 2021. Trustee Deeth, can I ask you to bring that report?
Yes, I'd be more than happy to. Thank you, and through the chair. Again, there was just a number of information items. The first was the election of the chair and vice chair. Happy to see that Judy is again our chair and Mark is our vice chair. Then the next was an update on enhanced screening measures by Matthew Kwan, and just talked about how they've increased to include asymptomatic testing using the rapid test, and that more information is still to come. Item C is in-person learning sessions for students, and Linda Pollock, who is our system learning resource teacher, and Natasha Duquette is our itinerant teacher, provided an overview of in-person learning, and that the sessions are being offered during the period of remote learning for a small number of students in the elementary panel with pervasive needs. Item 3 was a members update, and our Mark, who is the Vice Chair of FASD, spoke about the upcoming education webinars in February and March, and also the Justice Program in Hamilton, All for One. Then Superintendent Peggy Blair again gave an update on the Safe Schools Review report that was presented to trustees, and that we received funding for the AQ course for students with autism and communication needs. And then that Karina Grattan started last week as Manager of Autism and Neurodevelopmental Services. Next item was survey that will be sent out. That was to be completed, the GLE course. And finally, the next academic year, that the grade 9 math curriculum will be de-streamed. So with that, I will ask you to receive the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Deese. So to receive the report, moved by Trustee Deese. I'll have it seconded by Trustee Johnstone. I'll then open the floor. If anyone would like to comment or ask a question, can you please let me know, and I will create a speakers list. Okay, hearing none. Are there any trustees opposed to receiving the report? Hearing none, we'll move along to item 13, French as a Second Language Advisory Committee from January 27th, 2021. And I don't seem to have our trustee member listed on the committee report. Who's that?
So my apologies. That would be me, Madam Chair. Trustee Beck. I was late to this. I was just late to this meeting, so I think that wasn't captured here. But so on January 27th, the French as a Second Language Advisory Committee met. We had several monitoring items, including, and I will not butcher the French language, the DELF, which staff provided an update on the status of DELF for the June 2020 graduates. So that this is last year's graduates. The DELF was not provided in Ontario in the spring of 2020, and these students were not able to challenge for the certification. They can challenge for the DELF Junior at their own expense. HWDSB plans to run the DELF Scolaire in June 2021, if possible. This was impacted because of COVID last year in this ministerial order to stay home. The committee believed it was unfair for these students to miss the DELF Scolaire and have to sit a separate certification at their own expense. So this would have been covered had they been able to do the test while still students in HWDSB. Staff committed to providing an update at the next meeting regarding how to support graduates in obtaining their DELF Junior. Item 2, student enrollment and engagement. Staff provided a presentation on current student enrollment in French immersion, grades 1 to 12, and on secondary code French enrollment for 2019-20. 4,355 students are currently enrolled in French immersion, and we have 3,850 students who are studying core French who had studied core French in 2019-20. Staff also reviewed progress on the 3 goals of the HWDSB French as a Second Language program: increase student confidence, proficiency, and achievement in French as a second language; increase the percentage for students studying French as a second language until graduation; and increase student, educator, and community engagement in French as a second language. Highlights included, in 2019 and 20, 172 students participated in a grade 12 core French class. This was an increase of 14 students, or 9%, over the year previous. In 2020-21, there are 602 students registered in French immersion for grade 1, and 4,355 students from grades 1 to 12. The committee provided the following advice regarding engaging and retaining students. They suggested that we expand e-learning options for secondary French immersion, that we explore how to support students transitioning from French to English subjects like math and science, and encourage students to continue with French at all transition points. So, for example, that would include the move from grade 8 to grade 9. Right, just flipping the page. As well as 6 key my apologies. Staff presented around full remote learning advice sessions, or our elementary remote learning. In the overview that staff gave of the current elementary remote learning, they noted that there are 24 French immersion classrooms from grades 1 to 8, and the English track grade 4 to 8 classes receive 200 minutes of core French weekly. No advice was provided from the group. We received an update from the Canadian Parents for French, and they shared that it is the 20th anniversary of the Hamilton-Wentworth chapter this year. A one-year membership with CPF Hamilton-Wentworth is free for individuals, families, and organizations, including schools, until the end of March 2021. It can be followed on Facebook at CPF Hamilton, where we regularly post events, activities, give information regarding French language learning and activities, or visit www.cpfhamilton.ca or email directly at hamiltoncpf@gmail.com. The CPF and HWDSB are collaborating to provide Concours d'Art Oratoire. CPF is also offering free online after-school programs. Franco Fun, which runs for 45 minutes, 8 weeks, for grades 1 to 6. FSL and Viva la Parole, 1 hour, 8 weeks, for 1 hour for 8 weeks for our grade 7 to 10 core French students. With that, I also had given an update, and staff provided an update on the grade 1 French immersion application process and encouraged the committee to have their children participate in the HWDSB student census. And with that, I would move the report.
Okay, so a motion to receive the report by Trustee Buck. Let's have that seconded by Trustee Bingham. I'll open the floor. If you have any questions or comments to the report, can you just signal that you'd like to be added to the speakers list, and then I'll go through it. Okay, hearing none, I did want to just comment that I know staff are following up on is there any possibility that our board might be able to support students who have graduated writing the DELF, and I look forward to an update on that when it's available, as I recognize the challenges that students who graduated last year are facing and not being able to access that. Thank you. So to the motion to receive the report, is anyone opposed? Hearing none, we'll move to item 14, our Human Rights and Equity Advisory Committee from February the 11th, 2021. Trustee Buck, this is the item that you declared a conflict of interest for. If you'd like to step out of the call, I can let you know as soon as this item is done. And Trustee Miller, can you please bring forward the report?
Left.
Yes, thank you. So through the chair, the Human Rights and Equity Community Advisory Committee met on February 11th. I will start with items B through C for the clarity of this evening. There were several information items discussed at the committee meeting, including staff and trustee updates around the rollout of the anti-Black racism and ARAO, so that's anti-racism and anti-oppression framework and policy. Staff reported that based on the Human Rights and Equity Community Advisory Committee recommendation, this item would now be included in the Board Equity Action Plan. The Human Rights and Equity Community Advisory Committee meeting in March will be dedicated to discussing this item, and we'll be looking for feedback from the committee in terms of identifying gaps and developing future necessary policies and procedures. There were also further staff updates around the Learn, Disrupt, and Rebuild, Safe Schools panel report, the Employment Equity Audit and Employment Equity Action Plan, as well as the Human Rights Structure. Moving back to action item regarding item number A, the trustee investigation released by the board. Committee members discussed the third-party independent investigator's final report and the recommendations based on the student trustee complaint of a breach of the board's code of conduct that was released February 3rd, 2021. Committee members are encouraged by the Board of Trustees' vote to adopt all 12 recommendations of the final report. However, they discussed their concerns about the lack of accountability and consequences to the breaches of the board's code of conduct, as outlined in the investigator's final report. Considering the Human Rights and Equity Community Advisory Committee's role in providing input and advice on policies and practices that are critical in creating a culture of human rights and equity and an environment that is free from discrimination, the Human Rights and Equity Community Advisory Committee passed a motion to prepare a statement and provide recommendations to the Board of Trustees to ensure accountability and building trust with communities going forward. The community members have asked myself, as their trustee representative in attendance, to read the statement and recommendations at this evening's meeting. So that motion passed unanimously. Their statement, so I will now read their statement. A statement on the final report of the external investigator for the Hwdsb regarding student trustee complaint of breach of the Code of Conduct. On February 3rd, 2021, the Hwdsb released a final report conducted by a third-party investigator regarding the allegations made by former student trustee Ahona Mehdi. The report concluded that 4 trustees breached the board's code of conduct by behaving in blatantly racist and oppressive ways. The 4 trustees, as identified by Ms. Mehdi, are Trustee Johnstone, Trustee Archer, Trustee Buck, and Trustee Pagan-Miller. The Human Rights and Equity Community Advisory Committee would like to express our disappointment with the findings of the report and strongly condemn the harmful words and actions by the aforementioned trustees. As a committee tasked with providing guidance on best practice for matters of human rights and equity, and as concerned members of the Hamilton community, we wish to put forward the following recommendations to the Hwdsb Board of Trustees. First and foremost, we want to reaffirm the calls from the community, particularly the voices of racialized student organizers, for consequences for the trustees identified in the report. While we understand the limited ability for trustees to be removed from their elected seats, we strongly encourage trustees Johnstone, Archer, Buck, and Pagan-Miller to resign from their positions in an act of good faith. Hamiltonians have made it clear that they do not wish for these trustees to maintain decision-making power over marginalized students. If the trustees do not step down, the Human Rights and Equity Community Advisory Committee asks that all sanctions be applied to the aforementioned trustees for the remainder of their term to bar them from voting on matters related to the students of the Hwdsb. The events brought to light through this report have compromised the community's trust in the Board of Trustees. In the aftermath of the report findings, we wish to advocate for more robust accountability and transparency measures. This includes a thorough review and amendment to the Hwdsb Trustee Code of Conduct that applies an anti-racist, anti-oppressive lens and eliminates the clause permitting trustees to vote on matters in which a conflict of interest is evident. Furthermore, we recommend the implementation of publicly accessible reporting structures that indicate trustees' commitment to an anti-racist, anti-oppressive learning and competency. Moving forward, as our students and community heal from the harm caused and trust lost, we want to reaffirm our commitment to creating a safer, braver, and more equitable school board for students and their families. We believe every member of the Hwdsb community has a responsibility to uphold these values, especially our elected officials. We ask that the above recommendations be considered thoroughly and acted on in a timely manner. Sincerely, the Hwdsb Human Rights and Equity Community Advisory Committee. And with that, I would like to move the report.
Okay, thank you. So moving to receive the report, moved by Trustee Miller, seconded by Trustee Bingham, if that's okay. And thank you for reading that out loud. I'll open the floor. Are there any questions or comments from trustees? If you can signal if you'd like to be put on the speakers list, and then I can go through the speakers list.
Madam Chair, Trustee Galindo.
Trustee Galindo?
I'm wondering if this also warrants a response from the chair, being that we're writing a response to the earlier correspondence.
Actually, if I could turn over the chair, I had two motions, and one was to respond in writing, and one was to refer the concerns about conflict of interest to the governance review and our governance committee, our special governance committee this week. So if I can turn the chair over to you, I would like to move those two items.
Sure. I'll take over as chair. Does anyone else have any questions before we turn to Trustee Danko? Hearing none, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So just looking to move that we refer the concerns of the committee regarding conflict of interest to our special governance committee and our governance review that is being adopted by motion by trustees, but is also recommended through the report. I can speak to that further once it's seconded, but also to respond in writing to acknowledge receipt of the statement on the final report that we've received tonight.
Thank you.
I
Would anyone
will second that.
That is Trustee Miller?
That's correct. if I'm able to.
Yep, no, that's fine. So on both motions, Chair Johnstone, do you prefer having them discussed at the same time or as separate motions?
Danko. But yes, I think at the same time would be fine for me.
Perfect. Okay. Yes. My apologies, Chair Danko. I'll give you the floor to speak to your motions.
Thank you. And so I appreciate the statement that has been provided through the Human Rights and Equity Advisory Committee. I think that is something that, along with other correspondence that trustees are considering as we move forward in our process. I think it's really important that we highlight some of the challenges with past practice that has been used for conflict of interest. Trustees will note that in the past, even in this past fall, we would have had a situation where trustees voted in a similar manner to what's being raised as an issue now. And so I would want to make sure that as part of our governance review, we're considering this feedback and the feedback that we've heard from our community around that, given we are generally governed by the Municipal Act and a conflict of interest relates to finances as a pecuniary conflict of interest. I think as a board we have a duty to consider how we better define non-pecuniary conflicts of interest so that trustees are always in a position to make good decisions, to participate as fully as possible as democratically elected officials, but also to be accountable for potential or perceived conflicts of interest. So I think that is an important piece for our governance review, and I also would agree that we want to just acknowledge that we've received this feedback and will be considering it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to the trustee that is seconding the motion. Trustee Miller, do you have any comments?
Thank you, and to the chair. Just quick comments. I sit as a trustee representative on this committee, and I do want to just take a moment to thank the committee for their work. Their work, particularly around human rights and equity, is often quite difficult. Their meetings are often quite heavy, quite serious in nature, and we ask a lot from our community advisory committee members. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank them. But in regards to the motions on the table, I definitely appreciate a formal recognition from this board, an appropriate response, but then also, yes, let's please take the guidance that is laid out in the statement to our governance committee. How can we use this as a moment for some real evolution and for some growth and to really improve our governance structure, to make it more accessible, to make it, true to the work that we want to commit ourselves to every day in terms of representation, equity, but also, supporting the health of this entire system. So I'm hopeful with the motion that both there can be a formal acknowledgement of the work presented here today, but also that this can be another step forward for this board table. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Miller. I'm going to go through roll call now. Turning to Trustee Bingham, do you have any questions or comments?
No questions or comments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm turning to Trustee Deeth. Do you have any questions or comments?
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Turning to Trustee Johnstone, do you have any questions or comments?
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that captures all the trustees that are voting on this. Now, comments that I have, I certainly second the comments that were made by Trustee Miller and Trustee Danko. I think that there are two themes among many that immediately come to mind. One is the need to really address the concerns that have been raised around our governance and the areas that need serious updating. And the second theme is to our claim of transparency, which I think is easily disputed by the argument that 99% of our code of conduct process takes place behind closed doors and away from public oversight. So it's my opinion that on matters of accountability, conduct, and ethics on the part of trustees as elected officials should and needs to be as transparent as possible. And saying that we are committed to transparency doesn't make it transparent, and I think this needs to be a key motive that we also take away as we conduct our governance review this year. So I'm in full support of that motion. Hearing no other comments, I'm going to turn it back to Trustee Danko.
Glen, no. Just to finish the discussion on the motion, can you go to our student trustees, Hessler and Zakar, and then vote on that motion, and then you can turn it back. Thank you.
As much as I try not to make that mistake, it still happens. I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. I'm going to turn to our student trustees, starting with student trustee Zakar. Do you have any questions or comments?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And turning to student trustee Hessler.
No questions nor comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll turn it back to Trustee Danko for any closing comments or discussions.
Thank you. And I think I would just, again, echo some of the statements that have been made by yourself and others. I believe that we have important work to do, and part of that work, it has been started, and it will be through the review of our governance practices. It will be understanding what does it mean to be transparent? What does it mean to have clear processes that we can use to make sure that we have the trust of the public and understanding from the public? So I appreciate, I hope that trustees will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm now going to turn to a negative vote on the motions on the floor. Do I have anyone voting opposed? So hearing none, the motion passes unanimously with trustees Bingham, Deeth, Galindo, Johnstone, Miller, and Danko voting. Thank you. I'll turn the chairhood back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Galindo. I'm impressed that you kept track of our list, actually, with a little notice there. So to the motion to receive, actually, I'll just make sure there aren't any further questions to the report itself, as there is a number of items. So does anyone have a comment or question about the remainder of the report? If you can let me know if you would like to be in the speakers list. Okay, hearing none, is anyone opposed to receiving the report? Hearing none, that brings us to, let me scroll, our next item, which is item 15, reports from staff or school reopening COVID-19 update number 9. And I believe we have been emailed a slide deck to help support us through that information. So I'll give trustees a moment to turn to that, and I will turn this over to the director.
Thank you through the chair. Can everyone hear me?
I can. If anyone's having trouble hearing, can you just let us know? Trustee Galindo is saying no.
Okay.
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Trustee Galindo is good. And I know other trustees had trouble, but I can hear you clearly right now. Go ahead.
Joined.
Okay, so trustees, you did receive, this is a verbal update, but we did put a slide deck together. It's our 9th update around, it's hard to believe we're still saying school reopening in the month of February, but as we've closed our buildings and have reopened several times, that's why we've still named it as we do. The updates, we're going to be providing updates on the following on slide 2, some feedback, a thought exchange we're doing now on graduation and ceremonies for our grade 12 students. Associate Director will also provide an update around elementary transition. He'll also ask us, I believe, Superintendent Stefanian to provide an update on the new public health measures. So as we've reopened, there's new public health measures in place. And then I will provide a director's update regarding conversations with the Council of Ontario Directors of Education and the ministry that are occurring weekly, and then some next steps for reporting. So at this time, I'll go to slide 3, and I'll pass it to Associate Director Peter Sobran.
Thank you. And just want to note that Trustee Beck is back in our meetings for the sake of the minutes. Thank you. Associate Director Sobran.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'll do a quick sound check, Chair.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you. And so as the director has indicated, a couple of updates that I will provide and also direct questions to the appropriate superintendents, and then I will ask Superintendent Stefanian to bring a more substantive update in terms of some of the new public health measures. But on slide 3, we have been involved under the leadership of Superintendent Paul Denemy and an advisory committee that is working with our secondary school administrators looking at graduation. As we know, graduation, as it appears now, will have to look different once again due to the pandemic. The advisory committee has been looking at a variety of options, and as part of that, during the period between the 17th of February through to later on this week on the 26th of February, we have 2 thought exchanges that are out there, one to grade 12 and grade 12 plus students, and one for their parents, guardians, and caregivers in terms of eliciting their thoughts around what graduation might look like towards the end of this year. From this, we will bring the information back and formulate an approach to graduation that we hope will be satisfactory to everyone, considering the unique circumstances that we're in. And we'll provide a further update at a future board meeting. I'm going to go to the next slide on elementary transitions. And again, the elementary transitions, as we noted in the previous board update was initiated back in January. We do have a number of parents that have indicated that they have chosen to have their students go from in-school attendance to remote attendance, and a number of parents that have indicated that they'd rather have their children move from remote back to in-person at their home school. And the numbers are in the slides. Approximately 636 students from in-person to remote, and 683 from remote back to in-person. These are the students for which during this transition time we received their feedback, but I will note for trustees again that under exceptional circumstances, superintendents are reviewing on a situation-by-situation basis other requests for either direction in terms of in-person or remote. I will note as well that to support these transitions during this time, we have added 8.4 full-time equivalent teachers to our elementary panel, as well as 3 full-time dedicated early childhood educators to support this transition. I'm now going to ask Superintendent Stefanian if she would walk us through some of the new public health measures that have been announced recently and are being implemented. There are a number of slides here to take you through some of these new enhanced measures, but I'll ask Superintendent Stefanian to lead us through this.
Thank you, Associate Director Silvern. And we're on slide number 5. And before I move into slide number 5, which really focuses on the asymptomatic testing, I'll just highlight a couple of other changes that have been new upon the return to school and that are new for February. So trustees may have heard that the screening tool that our students complete has been changed from the tool that was used previously. Specifically, a couple of new areas have been introduced, which may result in a student, or in some cases a staff member, failing the daily screen and being in a position where they shouldn't be attending school or work that day. I will remind trustees that daily screening is one of the critical strategies that are part of the collection of enhanced public health measures to support preventing COVID from coming into schools and from being spread within the school. No one measure in and of itself is enough. It takes a series of measures and layers of measures to be effective, but certainly one of the most effective is if someone is unwell, stay home. So with that in mind, the screener for our students has been updated, and it has been updated now in that if a student displays even one symptom that is a new symptom for them, then the screener would direct them to remain home. Trustees may recall in the previous version of the screener, there were the more common COVID symptoms such as fever, new or worsening cough, which would result in a student staying home. But a student needed to have 2 or more of the less common symptoms, such as a headache or a runny nose, in order to be directed to stay home. Under the new protocol, any symptom that a student has, the student will be screened to stay home until they have received a negative COVID test result, an alternative diagnosis by a healthcare practitioner, or that they have been out of school for 10 days since their symptoms began and they are beginning to feel better. And as I said, that is a change to the provincial screen. In addition to that, there has been an additional change within the screen, and that screen has to do with an isolation requirement for household contacts of an individual who is symptomatic. So as our students and our staff work through the screening tool, they will be asked a question as to whether or not there is anyone in the household who has a new symptom of COVID-19. If, in fact, there is someone in the home who is symptomatic, even if they are awaiting test results, household members are directed to remain in isolation until the test results are known. If the individual who is symptomatic receives a negative test result, then the household members can return to school. Or if the individual who is symptomatic receives an alternative diagnosis by a healthcare practitioner, then again, they can return to school. We do have tools that were created in collaboration with our local public health that are currently in the process of being updated. Trustees may recall we have had the opportunity to look at the decision-making flowchart that supports families in navigating whether or not they can come to school. And then we also have a return-to-school attestation form that, again, supports families in making decisions around when it is time to return to school. So those are being updated to reflect the changes from the province. The third area that was updated in February was the area around asymptomatic testing. And so that brings us to slide number 5. Again, asymptomatic testing being one other strategy, one other approach that helps us to potentially prevent COVID-19 from coming into schools or the spread of COVID-19. Under the new approach, there is a ministry expectation that boards will establish a schedule for asymptomatic targeted testing in at least 5% of their elementary and secondary schools on a weekly basis. For our board, that amounts to 5 schools, and I'll talk in a moment about a little bit more detail. All of the testing is voluntary, and it is asymptomatic testing. So when we have our testing sites open, they are for individuals who do not have any COVID symptoms. If there is an individual who has a COVID symptom or someone who has a family member who has tested positive for COVID, they should be seeking testing through the COVID testing center and not through asymptomatic testing. As we move into asymptomatic testing, this work is being done in collaboration with our local public health unit, as has all of our work during this time, and they will continue to support the results of our testing. So on slide number 6, just to share a little bit with trustees around the determination of schools. As I said, for our board, our target is 5 schools per week. The ministry has also set a target in terms of the number of potential students who would be invited into one of the testing clinics. That target, again, for Hwdsb is 1,000 students. How we determine the school is in collaboration with our public health unit. Our public health unit currently has epidemiological data which looks at a number of factors, including areas within the community that have high transmission rates, positive case numbers, schools where access to current testing may be limited, and through that provide us with insights into where we should consider locating our testing centers. We are currently looking at a school hub model, school hub being that we will host the clinic in a secondary school, and we will invite in the associated elementary schools. I will share with trustees that we recently did a trial at Orchard Park Secondary School. We invited in 2 of the feeder schools. The current capacity of the vendor who the Ministry of Education is working with is roughly would work out to roughly 400 students, and on a basis of an outreach of approximately 2,000. So at the Orchard Park site, we invited students from Winona and Eastdale to participate at that testing location as well. It was an opportunity for us to work through with the vendor who has been hired through the Ministry of Education to see what the process would look like and where we may need to do some fine-tuning as we look to expanding sites as we go forward. So we do find that when we look at the epidemiological data that is provided by public health, they support a model that sees the secondary school as the host and the associated elementary schools invited to that site. The nature of the testing is open to the students and the staff of the hub schools, so both the elementary and the secondary, and any of the schools, all of the elementary schools would have before and after school programs. Some of the elementary schools will have birth to 3.8 childcare, so the staff involved in those programs as well as the children in those programs are also invited to the hub site to have asymptomatic testing if it was something that they wanted to pursue. Our previous pilot at Orchard Park was on a very snowy Saturday. We are now looking at our next pilot running on a Friday, actually this Friday, from the end of period 1 in a secondary school, which again, you'll recall in our secondary model, the period 1 class has 50% of the students in a face-to-face stance. So we're looking at hopefully providing an opportunity for students in that 90-minute window between when they leave their period 1 class and they either go to study hall or they go home to sign on to connect in with their afternoon classes. And then the clinic will continue into the evening, depending upon the timeline of the end of the school day. So it could be 6:30, in other cases 7 o'clock. When the company who is completing the testing, their turnaround time for test results are 2 hours. So we see 7 o'clock as a reasonable time in that families should have their results by 9 o'clock in the evening. Those results then will be shared with our local public health unit where there are positive cases. So the following, the next day on the Saturday, we'll be in a position to meet with public health and to respond to any of the positive cases. All of the positive cases are treated the same as a positive case through the PCR testing, which is the testing that happens at an assessment center. However, those who complete the rapid test are encouraged to get a confirmation test through the center. But nonetheless, public health with the school boards respond to the positive in the same way, regardless of the nature of the test. The ministry is asking school boards to provide a 3 to 4 week plan in terms of the cycle of testing and what that will look like. We're hoping to be able to expand that a little further, but also recognizing that we want to be as responsive as we can be to the epidemiological data as it becomes available. So we're working with public health right now on what the frequency of sharing that data will be to school boards, and that, of course, will also certainly help to inform what our planning looks like as we go forward. Moving to slide number 7, I've touched a little bit on this already. As I mentioned, there is a vendor that the ministry has assigned to Hwdsb. The nature of the test is different. I mentioned that it's a rapid test. It also is a test that is seen as being less invasive than the traditional PCR test or the traditional nasal swab test. And so the hope is that individuals will, if they are asymptomatic and feeling well, that they will avail themselves of this test opportunity. The ministry also has an expectation that because the tests are rapid tests, that a school site should be visited twice over a 3-week period. So part of what we're working through is how we can maximize the number of schools that will have testing, recognizing that we're going to be looping back to schools twice within that 3-week period of time. The vendor is responsible for managing all of the elements of registration. We know from the recent Orchard Park Clinic that there were some glitches for some families, so we are working through those. We have a meeting scheduled with the ministry and public health and the vendor later this week, and we're also hoping to meet with the vendor tomorrow. Well, we are asking families to register because that's helpful in terms of planning, because we certainly don't want long lineups outside of the clinics or gathering outside of the clinics. There is the ability for families to walk up, and they will be accommodated as well. But again, the clinics being specifically for the students of the hub school and the associate elementary school. And as I had mentioned, the testing is specifically for individuals who are asymptomatic. So that covers the asymptomatic testing that will be happening in our schools. We are currently in the process of working with public health around finalizing our location for this week. That will be confirmed tomorrow, and that information will begin to be shared out to the school community and the associate elementary schools tomorrow. On to slide number 8, the province has also introduced pharmacy testing for asymptomatic school staff. So select pharmacies are offering asymptomatic testing, the same type of rapid testing for staff who work in school boards. Again, this is for individuals who are asymptomatic. Well, the process came into effect on February the 19th. I know I had a couple of staff text me on the weekend to say that they had contacted one of the pharmacies on the list, and they received an appointment time, and they went in and they had their testing done. So we know that the service opportunity is up and running. And there is a link that is provided directly through the provincial website. Staff can also access that through the testing location area of the province's website. The information has also been shared out with all of our staff if they would like to avail themselves of that opportunity. And certainly for staff who may be working in multiple schools or multiple school boards, the province is certainly encouraging that as a support. And that summarizes the main enhanced public health measures, and I'll turn it back to the Associate Director.
Thank you, Superintendent Stefanian. So those are the updates in terms of where we are with COVID-19. As the Director will be highlighting in a moment, a number of the other updates will be provided at the various committees. So over to the Director.
Thank you. Through the Chair. Trustees, on slide 9, I just want to highlight 5 key items that have been discussed with Code and the Ministry on a weekly basis. Targeted asymptomatic testing. What's being discussed is roles and responsibilities between school boards and health experts. And since we're working with vendors and our local public health, we're ironing out those roles and responsibilities. 2, Gsn Announcement is coming up every week in terms of a timely manner that boards will receive this announcement so we can plan our operations for the upcoming school year and how critical that will be for trustees in terms of their budget process to support us with our operational plans. In addition, it was raised today around some concerns around enrollment projections. As we're still in a pandemic, there are still some parents who are making a choice, especially in the early years in full-day kindergarten, to not enroll their children. So the ministry said they are considering a GSN stabilization factor like they did this fall as they announced the GSNs. As they said, this early spring is their commitment. Also, school year calendar regulation changes. We're still waiting for the this year's regulation change around the spring break change to April. And also the ministry did indicate they are going to be changing the submission dates, although we're planned with our school year calendar in consultation in our process. They are extending the dates for some school boards who've requested. And also, which was flagged, critical Jewish holiday, Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, and on the slide deck there should be an H at the end of Hashanah. We'll make sure that's corrected. But it's been flagged by many of us that September 7th is the first day of school after Labor Day, and that lands on a critical Jewish holiday, and the ministry did indicate that there will be some regulation revisions for this upcoming school year that they're considering. We have not received them as of yet. Also around OSSLT pilot, the ministry is now extending the window that it can be administered this school year. We asked for that as a result of the schools being closed after the holiday break into February. So that announcement's been received by boards. And last thing we continue to talk about is the safety and consistency of the public health measures. We have to be vigilant, consistent, and we do hear feedback about our occasional staff who have a great pulse around it as they visit multiple schools. So we're continuing to remind people to stay vigilant with it. And we did state, based on the new public health measures that Sharon Stefanian has outlined, that boards are reviewing and will be watching closely costs due to potential impact on increased staff absences due to those new measures of daily self-screening with one symptom and also household quarantine and self-isolation. So those are the big 5 topics being discussed. And the next steps on slide 10, trustees can see are our next commitments to coming to trustees with other updates to the appropriate committees with the appropriate reports as part of our monitoring of this school year. And with that, I will pass it back to the chair for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you to the director and staff for that update. I'll go through the roll call as I expect trustees may have questions. What I'll ask people to do is try to focus in on your key questions, stay within our 5 minutes, and then we can always circle back to see if there's any outstanding questions once everybody's gone through. I would like to give our student trustees an opportunity maybe to go first and say, often don't start with you. Student trustee Hessler, did you have any questions or comments?
I personally, thank you, through the chair. I personally didn't have any comments. I found it a very comprehensive report. So no further comments or questions.
Thank you. Student trustee Zakar?
Same here. I don't think I have any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just work in reverse order. Trustee Miller?
No, I don't have any comments or questions at this moment, but thank you to staff for the fulsome report. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Johnstone?
Thanks so much. I guess just a couple of comments. One, I sincerely appreciate that we'll be collecting, just looking at what slide, I think it was slide 2, collecting feedback from both our elementary and our secondary with the 2 thought exchanges. So I appreciate that. I am wondering, my first question is, when would we be reviewing the feedback, and how would that be incorporated, or how would that be coming back to trustees? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with the director.
Yes, I'll pass to Associate Director Peter Silver.
Thank you, and through the chair. So once the feedback is received, it'll go to the advisory committees. The advisory committees will use that information to develop some recommendations, and then we will continue to provide updates through our monthly updates here in the board meetings.
Thank you, Trustee Johnstone.
Thank you. And then my other question had to do with just some of the health and safety measures. So back in August, when we first were putting together our exemption policy around masks, at the time there was one variant, and we had a certain understanding of how COVID was impacting our our students, our staff, our community. Things have changed, so we now have multiple variants. And I'm wondering, through the chair to staff, if there's been additional consideration on reviewing our masking exemptions. Would we need to revisit those? Have we had that discussion with public health? And if not, can we have that discussion just to review those policies around mask exemptions? Thank you.
Thank you. To the director.
So thank you through the chair. In terms of mask exemptions, the ministry has indicated to us in their COVID-19 guidance document that they still expect boards to have an exemption criteria laid out. But there will be some further updates that Sharon Stefanian and Public Health are discussing currently right now because of the variants, and reviewing some of the things such as shields and eyewear, and also around what constitutes a close contact with the new variant. So that's being discussed right now, and trustees will receive a further update. That's a discussion happening this week with Public Health. So in a director's update, I will provide that update, and the next month we will bring them to trustees as well. But in terms of exemptions, that right now the province is still expecting boards to have an exemption criteria because it's still in their guidance document to school boards. Through the chair.
Thank you. Did you hear the end of that, Trustee Johnstone? It's a little muffled.
I did. It was a repeat of the opening statement. So I look forward to receiving additional information. I would assume that as the situation has changed, that we may have increased measures. So I'm glad to hear that the director and his staff team continue to have ongoing conversations with public health as the situation continues to evolve. So thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Galindo, any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just want to echo a lot of the amazing work that our staff has done over the last few months. I'm certainly looking forward to future updates on what the impact of vaccine rollout will have on schools, where on the priority list our teachers will be ultimately through provincial recommendation and regional guidance through local public health boards. And once more research comes out on the efficacy on vaccines on children, I'm looking forward to having those discussions at some point down the road, but that's me being optimistic at this point. But I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And to the director, is there anything that you can comment on further, or we'll wait and see as we get more information?
Through the chair, as I receive more information, then I will be sharing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Dees?
Thank you. To the chair, my questions are in regards to the graduation ceremony. As we know, it's an emotional time, and I know parents and students start planning early. So I'm just wondering if we have any timelines. I know you're going to be getting some feedback, which is great, but I'm just wondering if we have some timelines so parents know what to expect. To the chair.
Thank you. And through the director to Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'm actually going to ask Superintendent Denemy, who's leading the advisory committee, for a response to this.
Thank you. And through the chair, we're currently gathering feedback from the advisor, from parents and through graduating students currently. That will close at the end of this week on February 26th. At that time, the advisory committee will take back the information and begin to formulate some future recommendations so schools can start planning and communities can be aware of what graduations are going to look like. We do want to do this in a timely way because families and students want to know what graduations are going to look like. However, we also need to be very astute to what the public health measures and the Ontario provincial recommendations are. So, for example, we were in lockdown and currently we are in red zone, and what that entails around public gatherings, social distancing and those expectations there, as we must adhere to them strictly and a plan in accordance to them. So we do hope that by the end of March we would have some further recommendations, but again, they would have to adhere to the context of the provincial landscape and the recommendations for the Hamilton area at that time.
Thank you. Trustee Dees?
Thank you. And through the chair, I recognize that, but I'm just wondering if we can, because now we know, we know what the different levels are, right? Lockdown, red zone, green zone, what all the different levels are. So I'm just wondering if we would be able to present to parents and students, here's what's going to happen if we're in this zone. Here's what's going to happen in this zone. Here's what's going to happen in this zone. I think it would just give them a greater sense of knowing that we're prepared for the various scenarios, just so that they're not kind of scrambling at the end there. To the chair.
Thank you. Superintendent Denemy?
Thank you. And through the chair, I can take that part away and go back to the ad hoc and look at the various different scenarios in comparison to the zones, and also work with Superintendent Stefanian in Public Health regarding different expectations in different zones and what is potentially possible to outline possibilities moving forward.
Thank you. Anything else, Trustee Dees?
No, thank you. That would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Buck?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Bingham?
No questions. Actually, it was everything that Penny had asked. I was really concerned about graduation and how we can look at things as well. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just add myself to the list. Most of my questions were answered, and thank you for the detailed report. I will note that I had the opportunity to see the asymptomatic testing in place, and I think it's encouraging and perhaps easier to have people volunteer because it's not as invasive as the COVID test that I've previously experienced. So with regards to my questions, they're regarding the new daily screening criteria that lead to people staying at home and isolating more than has been the practice in the past. And I appreciate the amount of communication that's gone out to clarify that for families. I was wondering, in the past, when someone had a history of, say, headaches or allergies, they didn't necessarily need to isolate if they had that particular symptom. Could I just get clarity on, is that now required until they have an actual alternate diagnosis, or can they preemptively have a diagnosis that they have a pattern of migraines, for example? I'll go to the director to start.
Thank you, to the chair. I will pass to Superintendent Stefanian.
So thank you to the chair for the question. So if the symptom that the individual is experiencing, so even one symptom has the potential of having someone remain home, if that symptom for the individual is something that is a new symptom. So if we have an individual who has a history of migraine headaches and the headache that they're experiencing is a known migraine headache, then that would be considered to be an alternative diagnosis, and they would not have to remain home from school. If, however, someone woke up, they very rarely get headaches. They're experiencing a headache that is something that they've never experienced before. It is something that is new and worsening for them. Then the screener would direct them to remain home and to follow up with their healthcare practitioner. Much the same as the stance that we were at as a province in the fall. We are not asking families with respect to alternative diagnoses to bring in a medical note. Information that has been shared locally through public health is that certainly would be adding an additional and an unnecessary strain onto the healthcare system. And so we do have an attestation form that where parents would be attesting to an alternative diagnosis that a student has and providing that information directly to the school.
Thank you, and you just answered what was going to be a follow-up question, so thank you for the details. With regards to our elementary transition, this was the week currently that people are transitioning back to in-person, if they're moving from remote to in-person. Is there any particular day when that will all be completed, or were all students back in person today if they were making that transition? And I'll go through the director to Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'm going to ask Superintendent Bill Torrance, who's been leading this work, to respond.
Thank you. And through the chair, today was the day, the last full day that students would have been in remote learning before transitioning back to their home schools. Tomorrow, we expect home schools to be in contact with with their students who are incoming to organize an arrival at school, placement in a classroom, and to remind them to complete their attestation and undertake public health and following all of our public health measures. We do expect that all transitioning students should be in a classroom by this Thursday.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And it's not exactly on the update, but related. I was just wondering if we had any feedback. I know we've adjusted some of our communications on COVID, particularly when there's a positive case, and we've sort of refined that communication and added links in. I'm just wondering if we've received any feedback on our communication and if that's landing with people, if they're getting the information they need. I'll go through the director.
Thank you, through the chair. I'll pass to Sean McKillop, Manager of Communications.
Thank you, Director, and through the chair. We were able to take some feedback and go to our Parent Involvement Committee back in January. As we look at the communications, we've separated it into really two buckets. One is to the close contacts, and the other is to the staff and community. When we go back to the close contacts, there's two sequence of communications that they would receive. One is the first notification that they are a close contact, and the second is the continuity of learning. And that's a critical piece because that tells that individual and the family how that specific cohort or class will be learning, or if it's an individual case, so for example, if it was a student on a bus or in a before and after program that is not associated with a particular class, this is the communication that would let them know how they would receive learning. The second area is really talking about staff and community. We haven't streamlined some communications. However, there is no information that all the information is there from the fall. We have not changed any information that we have shared. We have been able to streamline it. We continue to use our dashboard with information about student and staff cases. We continue to post information on our school websites. The difference in terms of the output communications is really related to the use of School Messenger. We have been told that we communicate very frequently using School Messenger to the point where we are sort of becoming a little bit we're clouding our messaging, and really we need to focus the attention on School Messenger to those that need the direct contact. So, for example, close contacts will receive a School Messenger notification where the whole school community at large will no longer receive that communication, but that communication is still available. We have heard feedback. Of course, every school and community wants to receive their information differently. So for the last few weeks, we've been really trying to communicate and raise awareness around how we have been communicating with our families. The continuity of learning piece, I think, is important to share that is at a school level communication, and the first contact is at a system level communication. So there is some differences in how continuity of learning is being shared, but nevertheless, the families are still being received the information, and learning is continuing at the school level when there is a close contact situation for the students. I hope that's helped to provide a bit of context to your question.
Yes, thank you. And I know people are often saying that I just received my phone call and my text and my email, but I'd rather we get information to families than not. But I think refining and clarifying is helpful. That does lead me to my last question, and it's about the students now and potentially students and their siblings that may have to isolate while they're waiting for a test or up to 10 days. Have we come up with a way that we're able to support those students with their learning at home, or can we just clarify what the expectation for that would be? I'll start with the director.
Thank you. I'll pass over to Superintendent Sharon Stefanian, who works with public health once we make that decision, what the expectations that are sent and communicated home around the remote learning expectations.
So thank you. And through the chair, as the director indicated, we do have a number of different stances with respect to continuity of learning for students who are absent from school, whether they are absent from school because of scenarios with a household contact who is awaiting test results, or if they are part of a cohort that has been asked to remain home in isolation because of potential exposure. In the scenario that the trustee has asked about, so we have an individual who is staying home because of a household contact who is awaiting test results, that would be approached in very much the same way, is any student's extended absence from school, recognizing that the student may be home until their household contact receives a negative result, or it could potentially be up to 14 days. So we would be looking at the student's classroom teacher to continue to provide the learning material for the student, much in the same way they would if the student was off with a cold or a flu. And certainly, if the student is feeling well, encouraging the student to complete the work. If we were looking at a situation in which we have a cohort that has been asked to isolate due to potential exposure, then we move to a continuity of learning model that supports remote learning and remote learning through the classroom educator, and that work is supported through Superintendent Torrens and the program team.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. I think trustees were able to answer their questions. We didn't really run out of time, but I'll just open the floor to see if there are any other outstanding questions that we haven't gotten to. Hearing none, we'll just need to have a motion to receive the report, so I'll just have that moved by Trustee Bingham, seconded by Trustee Buck. Is anyone opposed to receiving the report from staff? Hearing none, we'll move to item 16, reports from Committee of the Whole private session from February 22nd, today, 2021. I'll turn to the Vice Chair.
Thank you. Through the chair, I am bringing the following recommendations from tonight's Committee of the Whole: that the tentative collective agreement between the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, Hamilton-Wentworth DECE Local, and Hamilton-Wentworth District School Board for the term of September 1st, 2019 to August 31st, 2020 be approved and amended as per the School Board's Collective Bargaining Act. And with that, I throw it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So moving to approve the report, seconded by Trustee Johnstone. Are there any questions? And actually, I just go through the roll call quickly. Trustee Bingham?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Buck?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Dees?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Johnstone?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Miller?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Student Trustee Hessler?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Student Trustee Zakar?
No questions.
Thank you. Is anyone opposed to approving the report? Hearing none. just pause while I bring back up my computer. So we are now moving on to oral reports, starting with our Student Trustees Report on Local Activities and Ontario Student Trustees Association, or OSTA, report. Now, I'm going to open it up, and whichever student trustee wants to go first, you can start us off.
Yes, for this month's student trustee report, I can say that our main focus was the upcoming student trustee elections that have been delayed due to COVID-19. And we were discussing the impact that the pandemic is going to have on the elections. We brought some discussion points to both elementary and secondary senate, which generated some feedback. But right now, currently, we're looking for more ways to get feedback so we can make informed decisions. I'll pass it on to Student Trustee Hessler now.
Thank you, and through the chair. From the 18th to the 21st of February, we attended the OSTA-ECO Board Council conferences. At the meeting, we covered the following topics. The OSTA-ECO new advocacy group called The Volume of Our Voices, which aims to amplify the voices of students and their stories throughout Ontario. We also worked on managing professional development budgets, managing wellness with a busy schedule, and creating policy recommendations. We plan on using the knowledge and strategies we obtained at the conference and implement them into our student senate. Thank you.
Thank you both for your reports. So I'll turn to trustees and open the floor. Are there any questions or comments? And if you can just signal if you'd like to be on the speakers list, I'll do that first. Hearing none, I do have a question. So I appreciate the challenges that we're facing with COVID-19 and, we're thinking about how that impacts our student trustee elections. So thank you for bringing this to our elementary and secondary senate. Have you gotten to any ideas for how to gather more student input on that? I'll just turn to either student trustee, whichever would like to comment.
I can take that question. So thank you, and through the chair. The meeting that we had with both of these student senates regarding the student trustee elections, we found that we didn't quite get enough information to really put together a formalized plan. So over the next couple of student senate dates, we're going to be looking at putting together a more comprehensive plan over the next few dates. Thank you.
Thank you. And Student Trustee Zakar, was there anything you wanted to add?
I just wanted to say that I echo Ethan's comments. We are finding additional ways to gather feedback, both through Student Senate and additional channels. Thank you.
Wonderful. I know we look forward to hearing back about the plans. Okay, so if there are no further questions, to the director, I believe you've done your report, but was there anything else you wanted to include in your director's report today?
Yes, through the chair. There are two key items I would like to update trustees verbally around our strategic plan, in particular our positive culture and well-being. I wanted to highlight two things. One, I did send in a director's update on Friday about moving forward with the Safe Schools Review Panel recommendations. One of the questions asked of a trustee when the report was received, what will be one of the biggest challenges? And I said at the present time it's resourcing it, because this report, and it's critical, can't sit on the side of someone's desk. So trustees also in June passed a motion around school year budget for this year that any contingency could be used for any of the Safe Schools recommendations for this school year or COVID. So in looking in the recommendations, continuing to meet with the review panel, as of April 1st, I am doing some exec council restructuring to support this. So starting April 1st, Superintendent Stefanian will be Superintendent of Special Assignment, reporting to the Director's Office, with the main responsibility of leading the Safe Schools Panel recommendations implementation and still holding on to mental health and well-being, our social work. That then means that Superintendent Paul Denemy will be taking over the equity and well-being portfolio, again, as the temporary assignment. He'll be taking that work on. And Superintendent Laura Romano, starting April, she's been backfilling and supporting Superintendent Stefanian with public health, and she will be adding that to her portfolio. And then we'll be using some of the contingency funds to backfill and bring in an acting superintendent to support Paul Denemy schools. The key focus in this spring will then to begin to move on those 10 recommendations and put in an implementation plan, and that will be coming to trustees on April 6th. Our hope is to have the acting role for the next 18 months. However, that needs to go through the budget process. And in addition, review panel and myself are also meeting with the ministry again to talk about some of our acts and to see what the ministry will fund, because the Safe Schools recommendations, we are leading on behalf of the province, and our commitment to learn and share our implementation is key. And so we have had initial conversations with the ministry, and they're taking away our ask to see what they can fund us and support us short-term, even this spring, and potentially next year. The other piece of our positive culture and well-being I want to highlight is our Equity Action Plan, in particular our commitment to put in a human rights complaint process. The good news here is that in February, the ministry, through the Equity Secretariat, contacted us and said that we will now be one of the boards receiving funds for our Equity and Human Rights Officer, and that is Johanna Otete. So there's some clear criteria within that transfer payment agreement, that ministry funding. One of them is that the Human Rights Officer reports directly to the Director, and that it helps us institute and implement the human rights complaint process, which was part of our Equity Action Plan. So Johanna has actually begun that role today, and what that allows us to do in the short term is the current HWDSB funds that we use for Johanna are now freed up, and we'll be adding in a human rights investigator to help with the investigation of human rights complaints and to begin that process of consulting. So again, the ministry has indicated that that will be a program priority fund that our board can expect to receive on an ongoing basis. So we're excited about that news, and we acted upon it immediately so we can begin some of our Equity Action Plan commitments. So through the chair, that's my update this evening on those two key areas.
Thank you. I'll turn to trustees and open the floor, or do any trustees have comments or questions? I'll start a speakers list if you do. Hearing none, thank you to the Director for the update. Can I just clarify, as we're working through implementation of the Safe Schools Review Panel recommendations, how will that be reported back to trustees? And as we have this new role for Superintendent Stefanian, how would trustees get updates for this?
So through the chair, the first update will be coming April 6th to the program committee. I know Superintendent Stefanian doesn't begin the full-time role until April 1st. However, through a committee that's been struck to begin the process of putting the implementation plan, and then there will be updates coming to trustees on a quarterly basis around those recommendations. So April 6th, program committee will be the first updated action plan update to trustees.
Thank you. And just one more time, are there any further questions from trustees? Or student trustees, of course. Okay, hearing none, I will move along to the chair's report. Much of what I was going to include in the chair's report has already been covered in this meeting, a number of updates. I do want to highlight that while we are, where did my notes go? 1 second. With regards to the new screening and isolation requirements with one symptom, chairs in Ontario, when in our discussions with the Minister of Education, have been asking if we can make sure that the ministry is able to highlight resources that are
left.
it sounds like our chair accidentally disconnected, so I'm going to give it a few moments to have her reconnect. This is Trustee Galindo.
Joined.
Sorry about that. I was just kicked off of our call. So I'm back. I just wanted to highlight that chairs had raised the point that for many families, we know that everyone's going through a challenging time, and as COVID continues, this can have significant impacts for families, particularly on the financial level. So they wanted to make sure, if possible, the ministry was putting resources available to families, in particular financial resources that would be available front and center on the screening app, and the ministry has taken that away to see how they might do that. The other update I just wanted to highlight, I want to mention that trustees have been engaging in ongoing professional development, and most recently we completed a training session on Islamophobia, as well as a session that was run through Osgood, that was through the Ontario Public School Boards Association, organized it on Indigenous cultural safety and education. And for those who have engaged in all of the professional development, we have spent up to 25 hours on various topics since the fall, and those do include human rights and equity training, anti-Black racism training, anti-Semitism, Indigenous cultural safety, and as I mentioned, Islamophobia, with more to come. I did want to thank our Human Rights and Equity Officer, Johanna Otite, for helping facilitate training and bringing in community experts, as well as working as a facilitator in the OPHEA training that we were able to participate in. So that is my chair's report, since everything else is covered, and just need to find my agenda again. I think we're at a point where we can look for a motion to adjourn. So I will go to Trustee Deese, seconded by Trustee Galindo. Is there anyone opposing adjournment? Hearing none, have a great evening, everyone, and we will see you back at our next board.
Left.
Hemi Deese.
Left.
Maria Felix Miller.
Left.
Trustee Galindo.
Left.